Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our evening conversations with filmmakers. Some of you were here yesterday with Asghar Farhadi, and tomorrow we repeat the same ritual with Jonathan Jim Jarmusch. But this is the fatigue of the end of the festival. You have to forgive me for that. But in the meantime, today, simply one of the finest directors in 21st century cinema, Jonathan Glazer. Welcome to Bologna.
Thank you.
Do you remember the first film you ever watched in a cinema?
I do. Is this, do I need to press this, or is it
No,
on?
it's on.
First of all, it's an honour to be here in such a beautiful venue as well. Thank you for inviting me. Sorry. Yeah, the first, you asked, the first film, I do remember the first film I saw, and it was a film, it was Grease, with Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta. And that was in 1978. And I thought it was the finest film that could, not only that I'd seen, but that I would ever see.
Has it influenced you in any way, you think?
You tell me.
Were you an avid cinema goer?
Not really, no, I wasn't. I wasn't a sort of student of film. I didn't, my knowledge of films really were the ones that I watched with my dad at home on TV. So they would, come on when they came on, and he'd say to me, come and watch this, whatever the, Sidney Lumet film, say, for instance, Dog Day Afternoon. And I'd sit there with my dad, and he'd say, it's directed by this guy called Sidney Lumet, and he'd talk to me. He was a film buff, my dad. And so, in a way, it was how I'd spend time with him. He'd sit in his chair, and I'd sit on the floor next to his chair, and we'd watch films together. And mostly they were classic films. And mostly they were, theatrical narratives. So they were, let's say, traditional films. Brilliant, many of them, of course. But I wasn't really exposed to other kinds of cinema that I later became intoxicated by. But I wasn't really introduced to those by him. His tastes were great, but they were quite traditional. So it was very much kind of golden age of Hollywood, American cinema in the 70s. Not really Italian cinema. That was something that I discovered myself. And then when I was a teenager, it wasn't like I went to, we had some famous cinemas in London, and I wasn't a cinephile who would show up at the Scala or wherever and watch a film that had just been released that I'd heard about. I hadn't heard about it. I grew up in the suburbs outside of London. Me and my friends were more into motorbikes and music and skateboarding and stuff like that. So film wasn't in my life beyond the enjoyment I shared with my dad watching them.
Was your dad a graphic artist, a designer, or no?
He was an art director for a magazine, a listings magazine, TV listings magazine. So a magazine that would tell you what was on television at 7 o'clock or 9 o'clock or whatever, and he would be the art. He'd lay that. He was the art director, but he was a very talented man.
So he knew the listing of all the films on television?
He did, exactly.
So if his taste was more traditional or classic, when was the moment for you what was the film that you thought, oh, this is unlike anything my father has recommended?
I remember that too, actually. That was Oh Lucky Man by Lindsay Anderson. And Lindsay Anderson was a British director, and great director. And I remember seeing that, thinking that it was illicit. or something. You know, that it felt like that here's a filmmaker who was doing something that felt somehow forbidden, or from a place that I'd never seen a film before. That it shocked me, and it did awaken something in me. Yeah, and then many others followed. But that I would say that was the first film I saw that rocked me.
The edgier side of British cinema is very little known, but it has that edgy side. It had an edgy side since the end of the war, and it continued, of course, all the way into the 60s and 70s. And of course, your own first film,
right?
Even though it's not set in Britain, it's a film which I guess shocked.
Some of it shot in Britain, yeah.
How do you define the relation between the British character and that sort of pushed to the background or even suppressed sense of that edgy, that sense of darkness that exists and comes to the fore in some of the finest British films, including, in my opinion, in Sensibilities.
Thank you. I mean, give me an example that you're thinking of.
For instance, an early example, Odd Man Out.
Right.
Odd Man Out is a film that I see as a film that is, it's a fatalist, poetic, lyrical piece of cinema that one does not expect from the British industry of that period. Or Lucky Man, or If, later on in the 60s. And British cinema, perhaps wrongly, is known for avoiding violence and sex. And then you have that as early as the 40s. And you do the same thing with Sensibilities in a certain way.
Right. So you think that you're something British in the character of those films, you mean? Essentially,
yes. Yeah. In a way that is unexpected to me compared to, for instance, American films. It's there, it's designed in American films, it has its own place. It's almost not necessarily predictable, but to me, it's easy to say, okay, it's gonna happen, it's gonna be the next scene, a bad scene, a sex scene, a violent scene, an explosion of violence or emotions. But in British films, it's far more unpredictable. That's how I see it, and that's one of the strengths of Sensibilities, because
I remember that Burt Lancaster film Trapeze. Do you remember that film?
Yes.
And funny enough, I just remembered, again, just watching that with my dad, and him waxing on about how clever the avoidance of sex was in that film, because you see Burt Lancaster put his cane on the end of the bed, and that tells you that they're making love, and that was the only clue for that. And he enjoyed the obfuscation, that there were ways of filming. There was ways of filming sex that weren't overt, but I also like overt sex in films as well. I'm not prudish, and I don't think. So I don't know. I mean, maybe I wouldn't be able to identify this myself in my own stuff, but my own films. But I don't feel I've ever really taken on a film from a British perspective. I don't feel. I just don't make a film I don't make a film as a British filmmaker. I don't think of myself as a British filmmaker. And I mean, I am, of course, but I'm a filmmaker. I don't often think of myself as a filmmaker by that as well, actually. But it's not I don't feel attached to a certain any one sort of sensibility. I think a lot of cinema that I became more fond of was Italian cinema. I loved, I sort of watched a lot of Italian cinema in my 20s, and French cinema, and Indian cinema, and sort of things just began to open up to me, and I think I felt more, and German cinema actually, and I sort of felt more attracted to those sensibilities than British cinema. British cinema, there are fine examples of course, but I mean, I suppose I liked the Ken Russells, I liked the Paul Pressburger, I liked Derek Jarman. I liked the visual storytelling of those in all those examples. That there was another way of telling a story. I think English Britain is a theatrical, it's obviously got a big history of theatre, and so a lot of films felt like they were putting, I was watching recorded theatre, whereas some of the other examples of, Italian cinema, for instance, I never felt that. I felt like I was watching a lyricism that spoke to me more.
Your films are far from being theatrical. Still, there is a strong attachment to a place in the film, which is usually home. Right? It would be a Manhattan apartment, the compound in the zone of interest, or the southern Spain villa in Sensibilities. So you are, I feel, attracted to the notion of perhaps directing or testing the potentials of a confined space.
Yeah, I like again, not exclusively, but I enjoy the world building that comes with a film. You can take a fragment of a film and understand the tone of it. If I have an idea, just in a very small very micro, an image or a scene or something, I can see the whole world in that. Of the film, so I can sort of grow a film from a very singular image or thought, and I like I enjoy thinking of the world of a house, the house in Zone of Interest, for instance, the house on the wall, and really exploring that environment and. It doesn't. I don't feel like I'm limited to shooting films in houses, but I like when I have an idea which limits me. I like to find a limitation for myself.
So, what happened between these early encounters with cinema, along with skateboarding and music, until you directed your first feature film?
What happened between those 2 points? Well, lots of things, but...
what led you to go in that direction? Okay, you want to make pictures.
So, art school. I went to art school and I made a couple of stop frame animations. I drew comics a lot as a boy. I didn't read a great deal until I was in my late teens. I barely read it until I was in my late teens. I was much more, I read comics, graphic novels, comics mainly, and I'd draw my own comics. So it sort of things started for me there, and in a way, thinking about it now, those comics are storyboards to some extent. There's sequences that you're laying out and making choices about where the camera is. Not that you're thinking of a camera at that point, but of course you're viewing it from one point of view or another. And then I started to make animations at art school. A couple of animations, nothing. I was painting and whatever else, but a couple of animations. And I think that combined with the conversations I had with my dad a lot when I was a kid, and the books on his shelves that were very much about filmmakers. I just sort of felt like I had something in me that I could use film as a medium, I suppose. And so I and then I studied theatre design. I tried to get into film school, but they wouldn't have me. Rightly, I didn't get in. And I went to theatre school, and I studied as a theatre designer. But it was very much puppetry and lighting and performance directing, stagecraft, everything, model making. So I enjoyed the kind of the variety of disciplines. But again, I was sort of pulled more towards making films. So even though I started to direct friends' shows while I was there, because I wasn't a very good designer, but I was better at somehow organising mise en scene and so I started shooting a couple of films while I was there. So yeah, bit by bit, I definitely gravitated towards the moving image, I suppose.
And your first feature, Sensibilities, was it produced by Jeremy Thomas?
Yes.
But it's just so incredible that you had your first feature off the ground with someone like Jeremy, with all that experience and all those films behind. Not every filmmaker's debut is...
It was incredible for him.
I'm sure it was. I mean, the film was an enormous success.
No, Jeremy Thomas, I went to Jeremy Thomas with the script and with the writers, and we went to him, so he didn't discover we went to him with it sort of fully formed, and he loved it, and he loved the script, of course, and then he put the production together.
Right. Between The Sex Abyss and your last film, quarter century, and you have made only 4 features. What do you do in between the features?
Well, lots of things. I make short films. I've done sort of installations, things like that, sound projects. Lots of things that interest me, but they tend to be sketches that feed into the film I'm going to make. So, I don't make a film because I can make a film. I'm not looking for scripts to make and go from one to the other. For me, I have to be really quite compelled to make a film. So I have to, it's almost like I can't not make the film. So it sort of burns in me. I've got to do it. And, along the way, I'm making sketches really towards the film. It's not just the story for me, it's really the form. I'm very interested in the form of the film and how to use the medium. So I spend time thinking about the film I'm going to make, practicing along the way, and then applying what I've learned to the film, eventually to the full-length feature film that I end up making. But I feel my way along. It's in flux as a process all the way through for me, and so I don't really think of it like, I'm not making a film for 10 years or 9 years or whatever it is. I'm making the film when I'm starting to think about what I might want to make, and I'm making the film at that point. It's not, you don't just make the film when you turn up on set, So it takes me time to interrogate my ideas and feel sure of them, feel that they are fertile enough for me to want to spend time, however long it takes, making them, So, it's like it's a vacation for me, each film.
When I can imagine a film like The Zone of Interest, that investigation is in some part historical as well, going back to documents, text, literature produced, facts. How does it work for other films that are not based on...
how is it for other...
How does it work for the other films, the 3 other films you have made, aside from Zone of Interest, in terms of what kind of investigation for a film like Under the Skin you go through?
Under the Skin. I mean, really, that's just, again, it's like I start with some fragment or other, or some image or tone or something, and I just begin to build it. That's obviously not that doesn't require archive research or anything like that in that case, of course not, but it's, but they're films that Under the Skin Under the Skin, I was really imagining what it would be like to make a film about an alien, which is a ridiculous undertaking, really, to begin with, anyway. But then I began to realize that if I wanted to make a film about an alien, then the film had to remain alien. You know what I mean? It had to be. I wanted to sort of find a way of putting that character in the world as it is, not to kind of reconstruct the world or make it make it performative. I wanted to sort of drop the character into the world as it is. So I was looking for a way of doing that, and also knocking out along the way the kind of when you think about the stage, the set, the staging of like alien design, alien spaceship, all that stuff, which I really admire in lots of films that have done that so successfully and indelibly in some cases. But for me, I wanted to remove any of that hardware. So I ended up really getting excited about a black screen and a white screen. You know, I tend to excavate something and distill it just all the way through until I'm left with the essentials, you know, and then I build it back up again.
And for instance, in Under the Skin is the idea to have the film set in Scotland is part of that investigation of you tried different things looking for a particular texture, a feeling, a mood that led the story to be set there?
No, the book, it was very loosely based on a book by Michel Faber. The book was a really good book, but again, I sort of ended up jettisoning a lot of the telling of that book and really being excited by the just central principle of an alien on Earth, and I enjoyed building a world up around that central thought. So it wasn't about executing the novel. And then you look for ways of putting her in the world in a way that she doesn't disturb the world, that people aren't aware of cameras and you're not bringing actors in. And that led to us building a camera system, which we then hid these tiny cameras in the van and elsewhere so that she really could be in the world without interfering with it. So I became excited about where that would lead me, you know. And actually, there is the first sort of 20 minutes or so of that film. We had her driving a van, you know, in Scotland, and for anybody who's seen the film, and we had the cameras set up to be filming her, and then there were cameras pointing out the window at who she might stop and have a conversation with. And then in the back of that van is me and my director of photography and my sound man and so on and so on. And I have a little microphone like this, and she has an earwig in, and I can say to her, turn left or turn right, you know, pick that guy up. She'd say, I don't want to pick that guy up, he's drunk or something, and I'd say, go on, you'll be fine, you know, or not, and then she'd say, no, I'm going to turn right, and she'd turn right, and in that moment, you've got everything running, everything's, the film is writing itself at that point. It was a sort of holy grail moment for me that I probably will never find again, but where you literally writing the film. If she turns left, that's the film. The film's going to go down that street, and what might happen is the film. And if she turns right, the same. So it was an incredibly it's a remarkable place to find oneself as a filmmaker, making a film in that way. So I try and find a subject, and I try and find a way of making something that will just be alive to me throughout.
Can I offer you some water?
Yeah, thank you.
So,
thank you.
You mentioned the driving scenes in the film. Thank you. Sorry for the mess. And I was looking at Birth a couple of weeks ago, and the jogging scenes, the very simple procedures, people walking, people running, driving, very, very common occurrences. You have a sort of cinematic fixation in them, and all of a sudden, without showing anything, they take you into something, a world, a mood. Are you aware of creating these seemingly simple but highly elaborate, but especially when it comes to sound, pieces for your films?
Am I aware of it?
Yeah, that you is it part of that? Feels to me that seems to me that it's there is an image. There's a very striking, very, very simple image that functions as the opening of something grand. So that's the starting point, and all of a sudden it opens up. And it starts with that very, very simple thing of someone driving a car or just jogging in Central Park.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the way. Then, you know, it's about emphasis, isn't it? So if you have somebody running in a film and all they're doing is running, there's just a scene where somebody's running in a film because they're going from A to B, that doesn't have, you don't need to emphasize that beyond that simple function. But in that case you're talking about there, it was almost a kind of a hypnosis, a sort of a way of emphasizing that gesture or that movement, and and so that we can look at it differently. If the film is focused on it for a long period of time, and the music and the intention holds you and holds your attention, then you'll begin to examine it for yourself. I like the films I've always loved and still love are films that invite me in, that I feel like I as a viewer can complete. It requires a dialogue between me and the film. It's not just an execution of something that I can admire. It's something that I can participate in. So I suppose because I like that in cinema and in art, standing in front of a painting in a gallery or museum, your presence is part of the experience of, you're completing that, because you're participating and emotionally participating, and it is elevated and you are elevated by it. So I like to think of that in moving terms, when I make a film or a scene like the one you described.
Back to that period of investigation, which might last 10 years in some cases, but at least the gap between your films, two of your films, is when the project is there and you are just trying to develop it, is the sound part of that development, part of that investigation as well? Testing out different things when it comes to sound, or no, you leave that for later?
No, the sound is always front of my mind. I mean, and it's equal to the image in terms of what it can offer, the experience, of seeing a film, and nothing is an afterthought ever. It's things evolve into, they take on different. They have things might have more of an emphasis than I anticipated afterwards as I'm putting it together. But sound leads. I mean, the zone of interest is, of course, an example of that. I wanted to make the sound. You can see the sound, and it needed to be that for the whole conceit to make sense. And so I spent a year on that sound, and I audition every. We send teams of field recordists out to go and, with hidden microphones to go and record people arguing on the street or whatever, all the field sounds. So nothing is. Nothing's fabricated. It's all real sound that we then make selections from, categorize, and then I can then paint with the sound. So I'm then applying sound, and I'm saying to my sound designer, put that gunshot there and make the dog bark 2 dB lower, because then I can hear that happen, and then that, and then he'll do that, and we'll listen to it, and then he may say, oh, what if we did this, and we'll try that, and we edge our way along, but the scene is not complete. In Zone of Interest, I'm filming the actors in a garden with a wall, and behind the wall is a blue screen. So I know, of course, that what's in play throughout is that the camp is behind that wall, and we're going to be hearing everything that they're ignoring. So as I'm capturing the images, I'm of course aware of those two key ingredients. So it's never an afterthought. No, they lead.
And because your earlier years were spent on digging music.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm curious to know what kind of music you listen to, but how you work with the musicians and composers for your films, because they are different from other types of films made today in terms of sonic lead, orchestration, moods again.
I think they have different. Music has different role in film. Again, back to emphasis and what it is that you want the music to achieve. Under the Skin, the music of Under the Skin, I knew that there's no voiceover. There's no way we can know what this entity is feeling or thinking, or music is the thing that becomes that. Music becomes that. So music was very much the sort of blood stream of the film, and again I knew that before we shot, and then it was really about who can do that, and you know, I listened to lots of very great composers, and I knew I didn't want any of them. I knew that the person I'd be looking for would be somebody who has never composed a film or even thought to compose a film, but would have a sensibility and an approach that would somehow speak to the blood of that character. And I was very fortunate enough to find that in a young composer called Mika Levy. And we've worked together ever since. It's a really strong relationship, friendship.
And electronic music was part of your own sort of musical self-education as you were growing up?
What was the...
Electronic music, and was it, what kind of music you...
Oh, I mean, you know, all sorts. What kind of films? I mean, loads of music. I mean, every type of music. There's no music that I don't, you know, I listen to all sorts of things, depending on the mood I'm in, or... I do tend to listen to a piece of music. There are pieces of music that I may find that I will literally play on a loop for weeks at a time. And that can inform me when I'm writing sometimes. You know, and they're, you know, they are moods often, but they can very much kind of help me access the world. Because when you write, you can have these great moments of clarity, when it's almost like you see it as if it's a finished film in your mind, and all your job is like a stenographer. You just have to get the words down on a page before you forget it, you know. But that's not always the case. It's rarely the case, and those moments are few and far between. So for me, music can sort of help me hack into that state of mind. Do you know what I mean? So. It'll take me back to the space that I want to be in to find those ideas. And I listen to music for pleasure or for otherwise, you know, of course. We're always playing music in the house, and I love music, yeah. First and foremost, I think more than, well, I wouldn't say more than cinema, but
why not?
Yeah, well, they're neck and neck, you know.
It's easy to talk about sound or image or the story, as the location, all these things, as these tiny pieces of this mosaic that you put together and create your film. Sampling, collaging, bringing elements together from unlikely resources. But actors are a very special phenomenon in them, because it's much harder to sort of fit them into a vision, any vision, because they're human beings, not objects or foreign objects. How does that work for you? Because everything is so precise, that might become a challenge to deal all of a sudden with someone who speaks, who has a character identity, but he or she has to fit into this world, this canvas.
Yeah, I've got a you know, I love actors. I love working with great actors. But I never leave an actor to their own devices. I'm not just there to record the actor. The actor is a component part of the thing you're making, as you are. And so the actor's not going to know how important a moment or a gesture is. You know, you are. You hope that you are going to know how important a moment or a gesture is that they're giving you. So with a great actor, I'm often trying to reduce them down into, to go beyond a performance into something which is real. Nicole Kidman in Birth is, you know, for Nicole Kidman is pretty astonishing in that film. And the performance that she gives in that film is hard won. It's hard fought for. It's not. She doesn't turn up and say, "I know what I'm going to do in this scene." It's something you find together. You deconstruct. You know, I like to deconstruct it all until it all falls flat on its arse, and then find a way of building it back up again. Take away all of the artifice somehow. Remove all the artifice. That's quite hard to do with very, very well-known and very highly regarded actors. It's often easier to do in a sort of Bressonian way with with non-actors. And I like that mix, of I've found non-actors who I've worked with who just are. I could just spend years making films with that person because they're so completely and utterly kind of innocent of the camera. They're not. They're not performing to the camera. Partly that's also, I think, my sensitivity to the way I want performance to be in a film has also led me to play tricks on my actors and film them when they don't know they're being filmed, or set up multiple cameras so that I don't have to ask them to repeat something again. So if they pick up the glass with the right hand in the master shot, and I know now whatever I tell them, I also have to tell them to do it the same in the next scene. I don't want to tell them that. And that should just take care of itself. So by filming, as I have done, from multiple viewpoints, continuity is not an issue. It just means that each take I do, all of my coverage is achieved in one take. So it means the second take can be completely different from the first. I can throw everything out the window and start again in the second take. Do you know what I mean? I'm not covering my mistakes from the first setup the whole time. I'm able to throw it all away and start again in the second take, throw it all away again and start again in the third, and so on. And so I'm finding devices for myself, systems for myself, where I can have my cake and eat it, I suppose.
When it comes to actors like Ben Kingsley in Sensibilities, that's a very different kind of character and a very different kind of performance.
Yeah.
And
Sexy Beast was a brilliantly written script. My job in Sexy Beast, really, as far as I see it, was to calibrate my actors and put the camera in the right place and let the script govern. Because the writing is all about words and those characters, and they're so well coloured, so well drawn that I didn't want to get in the way of that. I just wanted to somehow find a way of fulfilling it. Ben Kingsley they're all great in that film. They're all pretty exceptional.
Am I right that Burst is written or co-written by Jean-Claude Carrière?
Yes.
It's just a curiosity because of his extended collaboration with Buñuel.
Yeah.
Did you have discussions about Buñuel then?
I did. Yeah, we did. That was a brilliant year for me in my life of spending it with him. I'd go to his house in Paris once a week. I'd get on the train and go and spend a weekend with him pretty much every weekend for the best part of a year. And during that time, of course, he'd tell me some wonderful stories. And he was a great teacher. And he had, obviously, a great wisdom. Him and Buñuel had a relationship where they would go off and write scenes separately, and then they'd come together at the end of the day, and they would read each other the scenes, and they'd take the best of them. And then Jean-Claude would go away and rewrite that, and so on, and then they'd do it again and again and again. So it was, so they were a fantastic pair, of director-writer, screenwriter, but they also preserved their own perspectives, So there was something in the meeting of those two perspectives that was very special. Jean-Claude Carrière said to me before I went off and filmed Birth, because I was terrified of what I was getting into, and I was making a film in Hollywood, not in Hollywood, but essentially with an American studio, which is the only time I've ever done that, and that was a challenge. He said to me, if you're ever in any doubt, point the camera at Nicole Kidman, and that was really good advice. And the other thing he told me that I've always carried in with me as well is he said, clarity is mystery, and I always thought that was a great wisdom.
Clarity is mystery, right? And it is something that I detected from early on in Sexy Beast, but in Birth, the opening sequence of the Birth, that's one of the, for me, most fascinating things about that whole sequence, that I felt there is an ambiguity about the feelings of the characters, what kind of feelings they have towards each other. Mm-hmm. And to some extent, even you deliberately making it vague about how you feel about them in the way that it has been filmed. That whole scene in the house, just in a very engaging way, that to the point that I wanted to last longer because it was just keep me mid-air. That what is the relationship between these individuals? Is it part of that sort of clarity, mystery thing?
Maybe, possibly. I thought of that apartment as as like an ante-room to the afterlife. That's the way I used to think of it. It's like it was rooms that were occupied by people yet to die somehow. So they were in a kind of holding pattern. I don't think there's a great knowledge of any one character to any other character. I think none of them seem to know each other. They live together, they're mother and daughter, or sisters, or lovers, or relatives, but none of them know each other. That was important to me, that there was, you could feel the kind of distance, the negative space between them all the time. They're kind of alone together in that environment, and then this boy comes in and brings something into that environment which changes things, which sort of makes the walls vibrate. Suddenly it's a different energy, and but they're all holding firm. They're holding their position regardless. It was an unusual atmosphere for sure.
But that metaphysical side of the story, the whole idea of, I've been thinking about burying things, or things that come from under, in apples in the zone of interest, the bag in birth, literally men in under the skin, and of course another man, Kingsley, in
That's right.
Sensibilities. What are you trying?
What's that about?
Yeah, what's there?
Again, I can't unpick that.
Right.
Don't know. Don't ask me.
Right. Okay.
I mean, you can ask me, but I don't have an answer for you.
Yeah, fair enough. But how should I put it? Is that metaphysical aspect of the metaphysical side of objects, let's say, just objects, not life or anything, is it something that fascinates you? Does it exist at all in your life, or no, it's just something that, comes into existence only in your films?
Well, I don't know. I'm interested in what lies underneath. What's underneath. What's other realms. I'm not. I like to think of things beyond necessarily what we can see, what's visible, because film is about emotion. It's about our connection to film is what we feel when we watch the film, and what we feel, the feelings we have are invisible. They're nothing. You can't film feelings. They're not. The images that you do film are really the scaffolding for those feelings. They support feelings. They're not in of themselves feelings. They give us the architect. They give us the scaffolding. They support what's not visible. What's not visible is the thing that you're actually experiencing, what you feel. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make any sense?
It does. And then the fact that, for instance, in a zone of interest, we don't see, you don't want us to see, you don't show it.
Yeah.
We hear it.
But you do see. You see it, you know exactly what's going on.
Yeah, right. But
I mean, that's a similar that's a Brissonian logic. It's the same thing. It's the sound. It's sound off. Can be stronger than the image that you do see. So it's or it re-informs the image that you see. It's using the space beyond the borders of the screen. It's using our other senses.
How about the notion of time in it? Because all of it, there's these jumps in time.
In which film?
In Zone of Interest.
Right.
In even in Sensibilities, the ending of it,
right.
It doesn't follow there by the pool.
Right.
We don't know what the final scene is, which time it is set in.
Right.
Is it in afterlife? Is it in hell? Is it
right.
in the imagination of someone?
Yeah.
So it's out of time all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
So you keep this space unified, intact, because you are trying to, I understand, get certain results for it, as it is the case in Zone of Interest. But time seems to be slightly more flexible for you and more rewarding in playing with it and letting it jump in back and forth, basically. From the first film, I don't remember much about the use of time in Under the Screen. I haven't seen it since it came out.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure about how to answer you with regards to time. I mean,
shall we just focus on the end, the final scene of the Zone of Interest as just an example? I mean,
okay.
How that
okay.
came
So,
about.
well, that was very much again, that came from I remember the first time I went to Auschwitz was with a view of making a film there. And so I hadn't been as a boy or anything like that, or as I went there to make the film. I knew I was going to make a film there. I didn't know what it was going to be about or how I would approach it. But I often go to the place that I think I'm going to be making something in, and I start with the space. I start with where I am, and that can begin to inform me. It can begin to make sense to me just by being there. Again, not because what I'm going to make, the plot or the story, or I don't know yet, but it's those feelings, what I'm feeling when I walk through those cabs. It's very much the journey of the film. It's my journey somehow, and I remember coming out of those camps and stopping. For anybody who's been there, obviously it's a grim experience, but I remember knowing that there was something about I remember writing it in my book at the time, that I needed to weave the here and now with the there and then. I remember writing those words down, weaving the here and now with the there and then. So there was something about what happened in that place. I had to film what happened in that place somehow. And I had to weave it with where we are now. So there was no so you're in so time is not important. You're in space but not in time. I suppose the end of the film came from that first thought where I stopped and wrote that down in my notebook, that weave. That it wasn't, a piece of history that we can close the door on because it repeats. So it was somehow about bringing that, bringing the past into the present and the present into the past, making it again out of in space but out of time.
Are you going to spend another 10 years until the next picture, or this might come?
Depends how long this conversation goes on for.
It's about to end.
No, it's great. It's just I'm hopeful that I'm going to be making something soon. Yeah, I mean it's I've got the urge to, and I've got some thoughts. So yeah, I'll get that.
Anything you want to talk about? Or not?
Absolutely not.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, if it helps to stop now, to have your picture sooner, I would be very happy to.
No, we can come. You're welcome to carry on if you want to, or if anybody wants to.
No, it's almost 8. Shall we see if the audience have any questions?
Yeah.
Sure. Is there any questions? We might have time for 1 or 2. I can see a lady at the back, and then there is the second one. I think that's all we can take for that, because it's almost 8, right? And
hi, hello.
Hi.
First of all, what you just said now about weaving the here and now with the there and then reminded me of your speech at the Oscars a little bit, and you addressed the war in Gaza, and you said something about people saying, look what they did then, and the focus on look what we're doing now. Mm-hmm. And just to say that was a really good speech, that it was appreciated, and I'm sure that it was nerve-wracking to do that at the Oscars, but especially for what's going on now. that was a very important speech, I think. And
Thank you.
in terms... And then I wanted to ask you, I imagine that you would be familiar, but I'm not, I don't know, if you know Mark Fisher, who is a British...
Yeah, Mark Fisher, The Eerie, what was that book?
The Weird and the Eerie.
Weird and Eerie, yeah.
Yeah, and he actually talked about you in one of his books.
Right.
I think it was in The Weird and the Eerie, I don't remember if it was Capitalist Realism or if it was The Weird and the Eerie. And sorry, just to be really brief, but the weird... He talks about the weird as an intrusion, like a thing from outside in the familiar, whereas the eerie is something that should be there but isn't, kind of like if you go to a village and there's no one living there and there's like that sense of eeriness. And I wonder, especially in the zone of interest, but in Under the Skin as well and in Birth, if you can see how did you work with the weirdness of what you were shooting, what you were writing and co-writing, and the eeriness of what you were creating, like in a zone of interest, where you can see it, where you can hear. It's two very different worlds.
I'm really sorry, because I listened to all of that, but I missed the actual question.
just your relationship with the eeriness of the worlds that you create. I mean, I guess the weirdness as well, but I think in the zone of interest is more about eeriness because there's a lot of sound there as well, not really much to see in terms of what's going on, and that's really eerie. And just to know how you...
I think
there's a lot of eeriness in your work in general, so I just guess I was just interested in, first of all, if you knew the work and if you read it, and if just how it informs what you end up working on. Does that make sense?
Thank you for your question. I'm really, it's hard to, because I don't sit and analyse what I do, I just do what I do. It's quite hard to then try and look at myself from the outside and think, well, why do you do that? I'm just interested in the like I was saying earlier, what's underneath. That there are as my friend Mika says, the place behind the place. The sort of what we are not, what's not visible to us, but what connects us all, or what we're all fearful of or hopeful of, the subconscious. And those feelings can seem very real, often more, and they, all of the, the politics of the world, that's, fear is such a driver for these awful events that take place, So I kind of think, well, let me think about fear then. Let me think about what's underneath these actions, and you know what I mean. So as I do things, as I think like that, I probably am drawn to somehow working out a way of showing that in various shapes and forms.
Yes, the third row, fourth row, fourth.
Hi, thank you for this conversation. It was very enlightening. So my question would be about the zone of interest, specifically about the ethics of representation, which I know you studied a lot about while making the movie. And so my question would be about the Holocaust movie tropes, because when we started making movies about the Holocaust, at first it was a way to show people what actually happened, because they didn't know what happened in concentration camps. And they did it in kind of like a post-traumatic memory kind of way. Like, for example, Night and Fog, it's not linear, it's like memory, it collapses on itself. And then at some point we decided that it was okay to make the Holocaust some kind of entertainment. With Schindler's List went from being something we needed to reflect on to something we just could go in and experience a catharsis and then go out and never think about it again. But your movie did something new, did something different. I think it's something that was never done before, which was to go back there and make us reflect about Auschwitz, but as you said, like the there and then and the here and now. So I'm wondering if you think that your movie could be the start of a new Holocaust trope or a new way of representing even violence and traumatic events in a way that we can, well, in the example of the Holocaust, look back at Auschwitz in a way that we can challenge genocide in the present. Thank you.
Thank you. Firstly, the films, all of the films that I'm sure you've seen lots of, and probably most of the people here have as well, Holocaust films, that I couldn't have made the film I made without those films preceding, without those precedents. Those precedents have allowed a film like The Zone of Interest to happen because like I was saying earlier, the sound that you can see, those images, we know what those images are. We've seen newsreels and we've seen other movies and we've read books and we've seen, terrible survivor paintings and all sorts of things so we all collectively have a knowledge of those images seared into us, which allows someone like me to turn up and say, well, I can, you'll see them if you'll see those images if you hear them. You'll see them for yourselves if you can hear them. So of course that can't be done. I couldn't have done that 60 years ago, let's say. People would have been, they wouldn't know what they were looking at, or rather what they were hearing. And I think in terms of it being maybe I hope that that there are films. I do think, yes, that it's important to look at ourselves, and it's too easy for us to think of others as perpetrators and ourselves as victims, or however we choose to see ourselves. I think it's important that we interrogate who we are and show that the film, The Zone of Interest, shows only, all I'm doing there is really recording what I read and learned, which is that the people who carried out these atrocities were normal people. They weren't, of course there were psychopaths among them who would be bloodthirsty, grotesque people, but the majority were normal people who wanted their lives to be better. And they weren't thinking about who was excluded from that and who would fall victim to their security. That their security depended on the subjugation of other people. I think that's what's going on in the world. It's sort of always has gone on in the world. It's going on very vividly for us now. We can all see it, and we can see complicity writ large. You can't. When I started making The Zone of Interest, I didn't think. I very much was thinking at the time, how could an entire society have subscribed to that madness? How could that happen? And I think we can see that, and I know that now I can see how that can happen, as we all can. So, maybe I didn't make The Zone of Interest because I didn't think The Zone of Interest was going to have, a sort of geopolitical resonance to it at all. Of course not. But I knew, along with my friend and producer Jim, that we were going to make we wanted to make something which wasn't limited by, it wasn't purely a description of the perpetrators of that particular crime, but reflected deeply uncomfortably, in a deeply uncomfortable way, ourselves. And some people can see themselves in that, and other people refuse to. But, clearly we're all capable of it. That's really what the film's talking about. And if it opens the door for other filmmakers to then find other rooms and other doors that they should open, fantastic.
I'm sure the majority of you have seen the film, but if you have not seen it, it is playing in the piazza the day after tomorrow at 9:45 p.m. Thank you so much, Jonathan. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Jonathan Glazer.
Thank you.